I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar, and I'm going to introduce our facilitator today, Wes Connor. So Wes, thanks for taking it away.
Excellent, thank you. Pleasure to be with everyone today. Just a quick background, I'm the head of global learning for Randstad Enterprise Group, and I'm thrilled to be with you today, speaking a little bit about the before and the after. How do we source and recruit now that we're in a virtual environment? This is part of a larger learning series that we've launched to be able to offer you real-time support to help you and your organizations navigate through these uncertain times. 2 weeks ago, I did a session on leading virtually in times of uncertainty. And in 2 weeks from now, we'll be doing a session on employer branding in a time of crisis. So as Tracy mentioned, our presentation will be around 45 minutes, and then we're going to leave some time to be able to answer your questions. So as we go along, if you want to put your questions in the chat box, we'll be sure to answer them. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our two specialists for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Richard Noreen is our head of global solution design and bids for the Randstad Enterprise Group. His team co-creates innovative talent models across the permanent, contingent, and freelance workforce. He helps to solve some of the biggest challenges in enterprise talent acquisition today, including skill scarcity, the aging workforce, digitalization, talent mobility, globalization, and more. Richard certainly is no stranger to bringing tech and touch to the market. His journey at Randstad started in 2006, and he has been a key player in the establishment of Randstad's own digital strategy. Otlin Hertogs is VP of Professional Concepts at Randstad Global. The Global Concept team ensures that Randstad's business models stay relevant and competitive in today's market, adding value to our key stakeholders. As you can imagine, digital solutions play an incremental part in that. Otlin started at Randstad almost 10 years ago, working in an operational recruitment role, and has gained experience in global HR, running business transformation programs with our strategic clients, and working closely with our technology partners. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Wes.
So we are certainly in unprecedented times. I'm sure you, like many other organizations right now, are having to very quickly figure out how do you find new ways of working, and most importantly, new ways of leveraging technology and digital solutions to be able to solve some of our greatest challenges at the moment. If you're like most organizations right now, you might be in one of two different categories. The first one is you're looking to ramp up very quickly, right? How do you hire if you're especially dealing with the global health crisis? Or you're in the camp where things maybe have slowed down a little bit for you, and you're taking this opportunity to reassess all of your business operations and your processes, especially in light of the world that we're going to emerge from post-COVID-19. So I'd love to hear from you, Richard and Otlin. What are some of the challenges that you're noticing?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Wes. I'll take it away. Thanks all for joining. So I think, as you expressed already, the challenges that organizations are facing can be very varied and almost at opposite ends of the spectrum. But what is common, I think, for all of them is just the huge impact that this disruption is having, and the fact that it's immediate and truly global across so many countries. And which means that in the extremely short term, a lot of companies just need to ensure there's continuity or a response, at least, to this new reality of social distancing and remote work. Challenges that we might see in terms of immediate disruptions might be, how do I virtualize my entire recruitment process, start to finish, including onboarding, or how do I automate large volume recruitment we're facing in critical industries? Or how do I engage with candidates who are currently in the process, but we have a hire freeze and I don't even know what's going to happen over the next few months? And I think that also leads us to challenges that companies might be facing in terms of attracting talent and building pipeline in this virtual world. Because it might sound a bit counterintuitive in these unprecedented times where I think employment claims have skyrocketed like never before. And there's a fear of recession, but in these times, even if you're having a freeze, I think it's a key opportunity to and quite necessary to keep your talent and your business super close. And I just want to give one example that our CEO, Jacques van den Broek, actually mentioned, a kind of a metaphor from the Formula One. So when there's a crash in Formula One, we see a safety car coming onto to the course, and all the cars have to drive behind and drive at a very slow pace. But what you see is that all those cars are kind of weaving in and out. Why do they do that? They do that to keep their tires very warm and ready, so that if the safety car leaves again, they can speed off and ensure they are among the fastest. And I think that's a good metaphor for where a lot of companies are today. So, the crash that's happened is COVID. The safety car that is now in front of us are governments trying to keep us safe. But when those boundaries are really lifted again, we need to be ready to speed off like never before, and through recruitment and talent, allow our companies to recover and grow again.
And so, hi everyone, Richard here, and that's really great, Ottiline, to build on that as well. Some of the trends that I've been seeing in the solution design areas is really about how quickly can you scale up, or quite literally scale down the workforce. And companies are asking us, should I press the pause button right now? I've got requisitions, I've got jobs to fill. If I press the pause button now, what's the impact, and how quickly can I accelerate, and how quickly can I reassemble or start to get engaged again with the workforce? Which also ties quite nicely, into where we are right now. We're all in what I call a rapid change in comfort, because we are working virtually, and the workplace of the future can look slightly different to what we're all used to in terms of the four walls. We're just in a different sort of four walls right now. And the impact of that, as we all experience day to day now, it's since I think March 16th, I've been personally working at home. I'm based in the Netherlands, and it's 4 weeks, coming up to 4 weeks, and you're at home, you've got your work, you've got your family, and it's a different environment. So you can see, I think these four challenges really start to set up how we can start to bring in some of the transformations from the traditional way that how we've been working into some more of the digital ways we can activate the workforce together. So shall we dive in, Wes?
Yeah, absolutely. Start the very beginning.
All righty. So we've got a couple of these themes lined up, and I think as you go through them, we go through them together, you'll see there's a bit of an ecosystem building up here. And the first one that really we sort of dive into is what we call the workforce planning. And many of us know we have some sort of shape of workforce planning. It's quite optimized, but when you look at it more holistically, workforce planning today is still very siloed. In terms of getting the transparency into the workforce, looking at that, not just from a productivity point of view, but also from a pipeline point of view, getting the talent activated. And that lack of visibility that we have today, if you can magnify that to all of us in our offices where we are using cloud-based applications through WebEx like this to connect with each other, but getting transparency on a workforce requires now some different strategies. Some strategies that we may have just experimented in the past. But, Ottiline, I'm sure you've got some great examples of where we can head with some of the workforce planning technologies.
Yeah, definitely. So I think being able to steer your business and your recruitment strategy based on data-driven insights is becoming more and more important, even outside of this crisis situation. But these uncertain times, I think, will only accelerate that. So many factors are unknown, and you want to be in a position to leverage all the data that you do have to support you in your decision making, and make it available immediately to support the business. And what I have found actually that businesses have vast amounts of data sitting on so many value. What is really the challenge is turning it into insight, and turning it into really powerful, easily digestible visualizations that your leaders can base their decisions on. And there are multiple technologies and platforms that can help you do this. I would also advise you to reach out to your technology providers, where some of this, through which some of this data is being gathered, to support you here, because I think they really have a role to play. And of course, where some real value is there is in trying to connect these data sources, cleaning them up, and then providing valuable insight. Now that can be done through, your VMS partner. Maybe you have an MSP or RPO you work in within a large enterprise. We within Randstad Sourceright, we have a proprietary solution, Talent Radar, but there are loads and loads of options out there. Tableau, Cruncher are two others. And this can often be quite a big project. It's not something you do from today until tomorrow, but it really is essential to stay competitive in tomorrow's world. And some of these solutions actually might be quite easy to switch on. One of those is, for instance, Foresight, which is basically a technology you can use to reach out really bottom up to your hiring community, to just ask them, hey, based on what you are seeing right now, what do you expect in terms of skills and in terms of people you will need over the next 3, 6, 9 months? Really easy to use interface and a questionnaire just to get a feel for your business and be able to move fast.
That's great. So if we move forward from the workforce planning, imagine you've got a planning now getting a little bit more digital. The next thing that is really important is how are we going to be engaging with candidates? Many of us are engaging with the permanent workforce or contingent workforce, keeping them active. And, it's a very process-driven approach in such that we follow up with candidates through a number of channels, email, chat, etc. It's done during normal operating hours most of the time. Sometimes it's automated, but typically it's a controlled process where a lot of us in that engagement will work between, say, 9 to 5 and respond and react to candidates pretty much at our own leisure. And we know that there's always room for improvement with engaging candidates. With regards to transparency, where are you in the process, so that we can keep the flow moving into the business and converting. So we're quite used to that. But Ottoline, how do you see that moving forward as well from a virtual way as we go through COVID-19?
Yeah. Well, what you're saying, Richard, there's always room for improvement to keep candidates posted on where they are. And to be fair, even without any digital solutions, this has become even more paramount in today's situation, right? There is so much uncertainty already. So it's I think key to stay super close to your candidates and the talent. And we hear actually a lot from our clients, but also from our internal recruiters, that candidates at the moment are having difficulty, or they're very uncertain to accept offers, even if companies are still hiring. And they sometimes drop out of the process or may not even apply. So I think there's a distinction here to be made into candidates that are already in the pipeline. I think in these uncertain times, you need to be transparent and honest, firstly, about are you still hiring? Make that really clear that even in these times you're hiring. What is changing in your hiring process? And if you have a freeze, be clear and transparent about the fact that you might not know when that will be lifted, but share your intention, show your true color, and be clear also about what the COVID-19 measures you are taking for your existing workforce. Because candidates who are doubting about whether now is the right time to make a switch might be wondering what will be expected of me when I do accept an offer. Will I need to go in the office? Will it be okay to work from home if I'm worried? And will my manager maybe be understanding if I need to take care of homeschooling? So I would say, in general, aside from any digital solutions, strategically over-communicate. I think, as Wes said in his previous webinar on leading in uncertain times. And specifically, when we look at some digital tools we can leverage in this space, especially when considering the beginning of the recruitment funnel or the top, and when thinking about large volumes, are chatbots or text bots. So these are AI-powered conversation engines that can help you deal with these large volumes, and they can quickly engage with talent and ensure they get a response, and that they get the response really fast and really relevant to let them know, hey, is this an opportunity? Is this for me? Yes or no? And if yes, a lot of these technologies out there are even able to already schedule a first interview in the calendar with one of your recruiters or HR. Now, to be clear, this type of technology does not replace the touch, right? It's only ensuring that the initial investigation, if you will, can be done on demand, anytime, anywhere, and is relevant and a good interface. And that allows more room and space and time for your team to really invest on the high touch experience that comes after. And maybe to give one example here, one example here where we used this in Asia Pacific is where we used a text-based text recruit, and where for a large client we had to go out to the market, and where we would usually actually approach an initial base of candidates to see if they're, or talent, if they were interested. We would approach them by email. Response rate, very low, around 10%. But actually doing this through text, which is such an easy and quick interface, we managed to increase that to 40% response rate. And in graduate, I think it's even higher.
So let's imagine for a moment we've engaged candidates in a new platform in a new virtual way. The next thing that we do want to start to organize are some events, maybe some recruiting events, to get to know talent much better. So all of you right now, we're pretty much used to multitasking. So if we move forward and you start to type 2 words into your Google bar, just Google recruiting events and do that image search. And that image search for you right now will show us what we're used to. It's thousands of candidates, all in a confined space. There's lots of investment on marketing. There's a setup in there as well. It's a very, very physical event, isn't it? What's the thing that we do? We shake hands. So we get to know each other. We exchange information. And those events are actually very important. But, Ottilie, I'd just like to ask, that's a very, very tactile, and it's a very, very, touch-based event. How will we be shifting recruiting for the future, do you think, such events?
So personally, I don't think they will totally go away. Yeah. We like the touch, right? We like to shake hands. And personally, I've done some recruitment events and I used to enjoy them. But there are also some downside in general, in terms of cost, in terms of ensuring that you spend your time in those events on very relevant people and that you connect the right ones. And even on, holding banners around with you to the physical location. So especially, I think, in today's day and age and in the current situation of social distancing, these virtual recruitment events, I think, are going to really, really lift off. And we see it often already in international recruitment, because obviously, it doesn't matter where you are, and in graduate recruitment, but I now expect we will see much, much wider adoption. And I think with it being a fairly low cost and low risk, the fact that you can really use multiple versions or forms of interfacing, whether it's chat, webinars, video, you name it. And it's also a low barrier for people to join. So your reach in terms of reaching passive candidates who, even during their working day might join a virtual career fair just for an hour, might be very impactful. And so there's I think use cases, you can use this either in the professionals, more experienced higher place, but also for more operational production, what we used to call really the blue collar type of workers. You can also use it. And there's one use case where we used one of the technologies that facilitates this Brazen in the Netherlands. And the effect was quite interesting. It was extremely time sensitive for some production work. Needed to hire people within 24 hours, and we were able to do that by selecting a group of 300 people who looked interesting, invited them to the event. 50 people attended in the end, and 6 were hired within 24 hours. And I think it's hard to beat that.
Wow. It'd be great. I know we're not doing surveys today, but it would be really great to find out who's actually experienced a virtual recruiting event. Because I know I've done one, I think, about a year ago. And you have these private booths as well, where you can actually interact with senior executives in a company. So somewhat it's a little bit more intimate than sometimes the physical recruiting event as well.
Yeah, and I think it's usually quite hard to get your senior managers, right, and your senior leaders to attend these events. But if it's virtual and they speak with relevant talent.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing, if we move on, once we've got these events, of course, can't see you on the camera, but most of us, if you put your hands up, particularly when it comes to talent, we've got some kind of active talent pool that we're building for our organizations. That's a multidiscipline sourcing process these days, also multi-channel as well. And it ties very closely to the recruiting and the engagement as well. And often you can see that sometimes our pools are filled just by people who know people, internal referrals, etc. But the idea of the talent pool, how we work the talent pools today, is that they're qualified candidates who are pretty much ready and active to be engaged on their next, let's say, career or a particular assignment. So, with that in mind, Ottoline, how do you see talent pools shaping up for the future in this virtual way of working as well?
Well, this is, Richard, one that I'm quite passionate about, having been part of a team to build a solution like this for one of our large clients a couple of years ago. And I know you're very British and polite, but stop me if I get carried away. I think this is really an opportunity to get ahead of the curve and thinking about the future of work and the way a company ensures access to talent in the contingent space, and building meaningful relationship with contingent talent. What we see in the world of work, jobs are turning into projects and into tasks. Gig economy has grown. Freelancing has now often become a preferred way of working, though in the current situation, some people might turn around from that. And at the same time, some skills and expertise that companies need are changing so rapidly that we often only need them for a relatively short time. So who offer access to our companies to these types of skills and contingent workers? We see the traditional agencies, but we also see now online talent marketplaces that provide access. But I think it's really a shame that access to this type of talent, flexible expertise for quick scale up, scale down, that enterprises do not use their employer brand to directly attract and engage this pool of talent. And I think that's an amazing opportunity. And there is technology out there that can really help you build and nurture your own contingent talent pool in a branded environment, where talent is engaged and where talent is, which we know in the experience from the experience side is very important, where they are in the driver's seat. They own their own profile. They can engage with you directly, keep up to date, and directly apply to relevant opportunities. And as you said, if you know them, if they are qualified, and they might have worked for another part of the business before, you can deploy them really, really fast. And that also links into the fact that I think whereas our more traditional view of having a pool of talent is always bigger is better. In this, when we're talking about this type of solution, it's not really about the quantity necessarily. It's really about the quality of the talent you have in there and the quality of the relationship with them.
I think that's really important. And, you mentioned the word, the brand as well. And I'm sitting here just in my home, and the brand that you see behind me is my brand. It's not my corporate brand or the brand of Randstad. And I think that's something that actually, we're all going to have to get used to a little bit. We were discussing a little bit in this morning's webinar is that when we also look at sort of the traditional job descriptions, you have the willingness to travel. So now it's probably going to start shifting in the future to, willingness to organize your work at home or something equivalent in order to get that productivity. Because when we start to move away from the talent pools, we're often engaged in the next one, which is really much about how do we start assessing and how do we do some reference checking with our candidates as well. And if we move forward, actually, Sunny, to the next one, thanks. So when you see the transfer of a candidate from a pool or into the next touch point with a potential employer or their assignment, assessments and reference checks. We've all done some level of assessment in the past. I've practically done quite a lot of electronic ones myself, and there's been the occasional one when you're invited into the the company, but you go through a number of rounds. Maybe some companies have 3 types of assessments. Sometimes it could actually be up to 6, and we'll talk about that on the interview section in a minute. But also that's when you start to get to meet your next employer or your next project manager or hiring manager as an opportunity. So, Ottilina, I'd love to hear, how do you think that our assessments and reference checkings are going to be changing more in this virtual way of working as well?
Yeah. Well, as you said, Richard, I think a lot of companies actually already have virtual assessments in place. And there's a vast selection of tools you can choose from, and those that offer cognitive ability, personality test, specialized for particular skills. And I think when considering implementing or using these type of assessment, it's really all about getting the data points and getting back the data that you need to base your hiring decisions on, while of course keeping in mind and bearing in mind very much the candidate experience. And when you think about what do you want to get out of this, I think traditionally we've seen very much more the ability-based testing. So it's a fail or it's a pass based on your current skill set, your current knowledge, and your previous or past experience quite often. And many technologies can now do that virtually. And sometimes, in some cases, we see in the current situation that we have to move that online where it's been face-to-face. So included here in a couple of examples are HackerRank and Agility, which are tests which are for the more advanced stages and technical coding interviews, which are usually actually face-to-face together with a hiring manager. But these technologies are really advanced in terms of providing a virtual environment where managers and candidates can engage in a live coding session together. But moving away from these skills type testing of what can you do today, what I find really interesting is the development of that we see in terms of testing potential. So in these times of transformation, regardless of COVID-19, we are seeing more assessments out there that focus on potential, often based on behavioral science, ethical AI. And what they really measure is they're looking at people and they say, will they be successful in certain circumstances? Do they have the potential to be successful in certain jobs? And that might be actually more relevant if you're in a fast-paced company that's changing a lot than actually what they can do today. So I think that's an interesting development to keep a tab on.
Absolutely. And I'm curious how those will develop even further, specifically as most of us have been and are adjusting to a different type of environment for our work as well. So, once we go through and we go to the next one, which is about the interviewing, and that's very much about human to human interaction. And we know that today, particularly in the world of solution design, we do plan on a lot of video interviewing and platforms to get that first contact so that we can start screening, we can start analyzing and, presenting the best candidates to our customers as well. Of course, there's a mixture of different media there as well from the phone. But, this is really the opportunity now when, as we go through the interview process, we like to meet people. We like to actually potentially meet our colleagues, our future colleagues. We like to meet our manager and our manager's manager. We like to experience the culture of the organization as well and actually get the sense, is this the right company or is this the right job fit for me and the right manager fit for me as well? And it's two-way. The interview process is very, very much around the talent, looking at, do I have the right employer, and the employer looking, and do I have the right talent? So, we do have the flavors of digital today, but Ottiline, how do you think that's going to just amplify itself in the future?
Well, a digital interview, it's a bit of an open door, but it's an absolute must-have, right? It makes sense from so many angles, and linking into what you said about getting to know people, it's maybe even more difficult in some ways to get to know your manager when he's wearing a suit and when he's in the office, versus literally seeing his background, as you can now see mine, through a virtual interview. So I think that this is a technology which is already quite widespread. but is maybe more used for international hires or for first stage, large volume interviews. But I think it will really pick up in terms of wide adoption in the business as usual process, even also after the social distancing and the working from home has been relaxed a bit. And so there are many tools in this space actually that you can use. And I think a lot of companies are even now leveraging some of the tools which are free and used more in the social arena, which I think, everyone's being very creative. Just be I think, mindful of security and stability of the connection. But most of these platforms, if you are considering implementing it, have like multiple options. You can either use live voice or video interviews, and often these technologies also include a scheduling function to allow self-scheduling on the side of the candidate and allow the manager to either, it can be integrated in a calendar or to like pre-book a couple of slots so that he can self-book. And this is, I think, underestimated part of these technologies, which can have a big impact. And then there's also often the feature of doing on-demand videos, where you can predetermine a set of questions, customized, even branded, even with videos of maybe your CEO or your recruiter or the hiring manager, where you can predetermine those questions and have candidates at their own time, convenient time, in their own home, answer these through text, through voice, or through video, and record everything. So on the back of that, you can really easily compare candidates and also maybe share them among people to be reviewed. And I think this has proven to be quite powerful. One use case where I've seen this work is for one client, a large multinational client that had in one region a very steady demand for some admin support. And so what did they do? They they replaced one step in the process, the first hiring manager interview, with an on-demand interview, which was standardized, allowing these contingent workers, actually, who were usually on a previous assignment, to complete this in the evening or in their break or whenever suited them, and allowed this company and us to work with them to really build then a talent pool of these talent to be placed whenever there was a new demand. And I think the results were quite interesting. They when they implemented this more continuous talent pooling strategy through the on-demand video interviewing, agency hires dropped from over 30% to near to zero. The time to offer went from above 2 weeks to just under a week. And I think what's really key to call out here is that they didn't just implement the tool, but they really reassessed the entire process around it, right? They changed their approach. And that's something across all the solutions we are covering today to keep in mind. Start not thinking about how do we virtualize the exact same process we have today. Don't even try to create a process that will be useful tomorrow, but think about the day after, right?
Absolutely. I think, still a lot of questions around the effectiveness of video interviewing. I think those are some nice case studies there, Ottoline. Thanks for sharing those. Because I think if we move to the next one, you've gone through your interview schedule and you've met you've met your potential employee and you're ready to get onboarded in an organization. Now, I can speak, since the 16th of March, have really been trying to figure out how many onboarding experiences just got cancelled because, you couldn't turn up to your new location. You couldn't collect any equipment. You didn't get your usernames, your passwords, because HR or IT couldn't distribute those remotely. You physically had to sign for something as well with a pen. And that's quite an experience to go through. Onboarding is also a very special experience to go through with a lot of new hires as well, whether it's a contingent worker taking their project assignment on or a full-time worker going into new employment. Everyone wants to make an impression, and first impressions count as well. So curious, Ottoline, as we take onboarding from, it's typically a very, very physical activity. How do you think we can start virtualizing that and getting it a little bit more distributed?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a challenge which is probably for a lot of people on the call also very relevant. We see many of our clients really jumping on this right now, whether it's concerns onboarding more on the, let's say, the compliance side, the getting the laptop, looking at the policies, but also really the induction and the whole the touch, the culture, the everything around that. And we have a couple of use cases already where we've used technology to facilitate this process and totally virtualize it in just a few days in India, where it was not digital at all. And also on that side, but also some case studies on the other side where we, for a large client, have supported them to digitalize and take away actually a lot of work from their HR department and standardized, made a very consistent virtual process, building in a lot of employer brand elements in there to ensure everyone has a very consistent and high touch experience. So I think that for these challenges, there is really quite a broad suite of solutions, technology solutions that you can use to underpin it. It can be even digital signatures, right? If there are policies to sign, can you send them out and get a digital signature, instead of a physical one? We actually often use our video interviewing technology that we discussed just before to build a process for clients where they can record a lot of messages and even now video the office, right? And have someone paint the picture of what the culture is like to create a very personal, customized onboarding experience. And in these times of uncertainty, we discussed it when we touched on the point of engaging candidates and engaging talent. I think the rule less is more does not apply. So really, find creative ways for this virtual onboarding. Also, send people something at home, maybe welcome a package, or plan loads and loads of social touch points and virtual coffees. To make people feel really welcome, because the only space you can now showcase the values, the cultures, and your company is virtual.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so critical to get right, because once you've been onboarded, the next thing that's going to happen if you're in your first 3 months or 6 months and you kind of ramp up into your first year at a company, and we really need to start looking at skills and internal mobility as well. So when we move forward, you can actually start to think about the training, the upskilling. A lot of us have actually been on training courses which are designed by our organizations and companies. I know particularly at Randstad, we've got like an online learning university, plus we also have what's called the Fritz Goldsmeding Academy, which are also off-campus learning events where you are in a hotel somewhere and you're also mixing with other companies at the same time and networking. So skilling and internal mobility as well is one of the other important areas that when we look to virtual, I think, and I'm speaking very personally, with our children at home right now, they're doing remote learning with their teachers. I think they're picking it up and adapting a little bit more easy than I think myself right now. But Ottilie, if we look at some of the digital ways and virtual ways of how can we create that lifelong learning experience, and also not only that, particularly we all sometimes come from that office environment where you're exposed to peer groups, you're exposed to leadership, you're exposed to very senior leadership as well, and they're talent spotting. Maybe not consciously, but maybe that's because of those connection moments that you're more, they can really appreciate the contribution that you bring. How are we going to start looking at that from a virtual point of view?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, I was able to share, I'm going to answer this with a personal example. I was able to share a quote from our CEO just now, because he actually joined one of my virtual learning experiences this morning.
Oh, really?
Which, I was very happy about, to get an opportunity with the group to have an open discussion with him.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I think it's also really a commitment of your leadership to make this time and to really be present and ensure that you you show you're interested and ensure that you are invested in the development of your people. Following on, I think in terms of virtualizing onboarding, virtualizing training, I think there's so much you can do, and also so much you can do with people who are not necessarily very tech savvy. So a lot of the tools we mention here can be used also for in the blue collar space. Yeah. So they might need some tweaks, but there are loads of technologies that for instance, don't require people to download something, or are not very, very complex. So just to keep in mind, because where we often focus our conversation maybe a little bit more towards the professional space. Also one thing I wanted to highlight regarding internal mobility and skilling is what we're seeing now in the market under the current circumstances, is that many companies are looking for ways to support their employees in these uncertain times. And I personally think it is very powerful and also heartwarming to see how many people are sharing online learning capabilities about working remotely, about being effective when working from home, about staying sane in this environment. And we're also seeing a lot of companies actually use some virtual skilling tools to ensure that they have people that can back up some essential people to keep their business going, especially in essential industries. Yeah. So this really is tooling that you need to consider for that, and to ensure that you have some backup that you really can keep going. Or if you are having to consider maybe even laying off groups of people, whereas in another part of your business you are seeing a peak in demand, and try to leverage these tools to maybe redeploy and reskill and see if you can find another job for these people.
I think that's a good point moving forward from the skilling and internal mobility. When we come to redeployment and particularly sort of outplacement of talent, I used to see cycles, particularly in the solution design area, models that would be designed around 6 to 8 year cycles. Basically, you could see talent coming in, moving around, getting internal promotions, or just leaving, natural attrition, or going on some more short-term projects, etc. And that momentum in there were very much driving back, sort of linking to a company's workforce planning. Are they building up the future leadership of the organization? How's the competitive arena out there that their business model needs to stand up to as well? And how strong is the talent that's underpinning that business model? And that's come a long way from where we, I think, are today. And if we look towards the future, Ottoline, with regards to the more virtual way of redeployment, outplacement, how can we keep people moving from how can we keep people in employment in that space?
Yeah. Well, you already said it, right, Richard? It starts really with doing that assessment and the workforce planning. You need to know where you are going, or at least try to paint some scenarios and build some pictures of where you could potentially go with your company. And in addition to the current crisis we find ourselves in, I think what will be and what is a very big impact on many companies is the fact we're in the fourth industrial revolution.
Right.
Automation on the rise. Many companies are in the midst of digital transformation. Demographics are changing. So the first thing really to do is companies need to ask themselves, how do I remain competitive? And do I have a sustainable workforce? And there are really some technical solutions, digital solutions that can help you with that. Can help you in terms of determining what are the skills we need? Do we have what we need? Should we buy what we don't have? Or can we build it with some current resource? And a few tools that can help there, we've listed here below. So an example is Fathom, which is a company that helps organizations, governments to get insight into what the impact is of automation on their business and on the skills or gaps that can be created. Another tool that can help is Pymetrics, It's an assessment tool. Gamification plays a big part. It has a great interface, but it can actually also help you assess your internal workforce. Looking at the potential of people being redeployed when you know where your company is shifting to over the longer term. So you can be really focused in reskilling and trying to prevent actually having to let people move out of the organization. Obviously, if you do have to do so, and in the current situation, I think many companies are facing that situation also under the very difficult circumstancing of having to do that and having to have those conversations virtually, which I can imagine for leadership must be a very tough situation. But there are quite a lot of virtual service offerings out there today. RiseSmart is Randstad example. That provide an offering to support and ease this type of changes in your company, both for people who will continue in the company, and we need to ensure they are resilient, and it's a difficult period, and for people who are maybe transitioning out, and offering also a lot of this support, very personalized, individual, and virtual. So there are options out there if you unfortunately do have to go this route.
So we still have the rise of the machines to contend with. We're a pretty resilient human race, aren't we? So thanks, Othleen. Wes, I'd like to hand back to yourself right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Odeline and Richard. I don't know about you on the call, but I find myself so excited. I sat through this yesterday also, and I've just taken all the possibility of all the new ways of work that we're going to discover during this time. And I think much like leaving the 2008 economic crisis, we at that time also emerged with many new ways of working that really have enabled us. I think the three questions to take away and to really start asking yourself is, in light of the recent changes, and if we know we're going to emerge from this crisis in a virtual world, or at least leveraging our digital solutions, which hiring processes are likely to change in your organization and which won't? And based on that, so looking ahead, which strategic initiatives do you have to revisit or maybe reprioritize as a result of these potential changes? And then, the challenge we're all facing is that how do we plan for the immediate, and then how do we look at midterm recovery and set ourselves up so that post COVID-19, that we enter the market able to thrive? So we put together a website to be able to assist you navigating these digital solutions. You'll see the address there, digitalsupport.randstad.com. I encourage you to visit it and take a look. It's laid out really intuitively, and you can sort of get more assistance and some more detail on some of these digital solutions. Okay, I think we have around 10 minutes for questions. So I see on the question box, we've had quite a few. The first one was around some effective techniques for connecting and engaging virtually with more blue-collar professionals who may not use traditional job boards or other online tools. Any recommendations?
So one of the tools we actually use is text, or WhatsApp. Very simple text-based ways to get in touch with your talent or your candidates. And also maybe one other thing is I think that we shouldn't underestimate the access to technology people have. I mean, we need to keep the talent experience at the very heart and need to be aware of whether or not they have access. But we see that the whole digital tools are taking over now so fast that I think that also digitalization and penetration across our communities and across all layers and broad left center is really accelerating now as well.
Thanks. Another question around how do we get those who are maybe struggling to adopt technology? They just still don't have a handle on it, like using a computer or having an email, using FaceTime. Mm-hmm. What's your best tip to help support everyone in the organization, really to upscale themselves?
I think we've all got our little spin on that, Wes, and the crisis that we are in right now is actually, like it or not, I think people are getting more closer to the tech. So they're really starting to touch it in ways that they would never have dreamt of in the past. I've read some very heartwarming stories, which you can find of people that just are not allowed to visit their loved ones who are actually in hospitals or in the care right now. So, FaceTime is very, very important when you have nurses and doctors who say, sorry, you just can't physically come in to connect, but we'll FaceTime you, we'll connect. And then what you do start to see is that curiosity when it comes to the technology starts to disappear. It's more about I need to connect with someone and I need to learn a platform in order to do that. And yes, I think we all have a responsibility to make sure the platforms, the e-solutions, the wonderful ways that we can connect with talents and customers to make them as simple and as easy to do and as efficient, but also safe at the same time.
Yeah.
I think, one of the questions that we had this morning was about data usage, transparency. We need, and that's our responsibility, to make sure that's all handled in the most compliant ways possible, protecting your identity. So yeah, I do think that we're going to have to still have some some learning experiences, but it's happening now. Actually, it's happening in the moment.
Yeah, and to build on that, Richard, is I think we need to be very open and offer a lot of opportunities to our employees and the talent we're reaching out to with instructions on how to use things, and just make it very simple. If possible, offer it in different formats. Some people like to look at a picture, other people like to read a few bullet points with instructions on what to do. And that does not only go for maybe people who are not as digitally savvy, but actually also for our talent and hiring managers, which, for instance, are engaging in interviews digitally, be very clear about what is the etiquette actually in this new type of interviewing. What are the do's? What are the don'ts? What do you need to think of in terms of digital setup? So, yeah, I think we need to just offer a lot of support.
And it is tough. We've got to be authentic as well at the same time. And I think these platforms tend to fear that identity and authenticity at the same time. So, transforming into this way of working and connecting is not going to happen overnight. Let's be realistic about that.
Yeah. I'd say from my observations, because learning is the first place that we come to be able to really quickly train our people. And I've learned a hard lesson in that I think if we try and lay a digital solution over the way we do things traditionally, we have troubles with adoption, because we need to go back and re-engineer the process so it feels intuitive. So I think that's also essential. And then, like you said, equipping people with the tools, not assuming, like to identify tech ambassadors. So, take your early adopters in the organization and really celebrate them. And I also, there's this thing around ageism that we think there's certain tradition, generations that don't adopt technology. And I would argue that that's a stereotype, because my father's in the 70s and he has more Twitter followers than I do. So I think find people of all generations also that you can champion. Okay.
Absolutely.
Another question here around, do you have any recommendations regarding applications or programs that could facilitate conducting business case studies, where candidates would get a hypothetical business scenario and they would have to propose their solution?
Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't be able to answer just on the top of my head, and because I don't have that review ready here. I don't know if we have some digital support.
There are. So it's a really good question. I mean, you've got to look at some of the professional learning establishments like the London Business School. So you do, for those of us that do MBAs, you have different ways of learning. And but that's not always accessible for everyone. And I think where we're looking at the transformation right now is we have not, as an industry, or there is not the formula to make that happen right now. For those of you that love to play computer games, I encourage you to play the Startup Company, for example. It's not connected to any organization, but you're actually in a simulated company where you're building it. You have to hire people. You've got to give them activities to do. You've got to control salaries. You've got to get, office plants, furniture. Okay, that's maybe old school, but plants and furniture. But it's a way that you can start simulating and learnings from different types of business cases. So I do think there will be new business models emerging when you can start doing those business case simulations more remotely, but also in an engaging way that's going to be relevant to the type of functions and activities a virtual way and a virtual business model will start to shape up.
Yeah. And just, I think in general, when considering these new types of virtual assessments, I think it's very important to keep in mind, do you know exactly what you want to measure?
Yeah.
And when reviewing different providers, also really look at how am I going to get the data or the results? Will it be enough, and how will I base my decisions on it? Also, don't be afraid after a review period to look at the results and say, well, yes, it works, or yes, it does not work.
Nice. What's your best recommendation? I'm thinking if I'm, in talent acquisition, or I'm looking to start implementing some digital solutions, it could perhaps be overwhelming because there are so many options in so many areas that I can move the needle. What's your best advice as far as where should I start?
Ooh, Ottoline?
Yeah, I thought I'll leave the floor to you. So where to start? Well, obviously, immediate disruption. You need to be in touch with your business to ensure that you can at least ensure business continuity. But let's assume we have that covered, and that you can maintain the normal, or at least the normal, maintain business. Then I think this is really an opportunity, actually, the situation we are now in, when there is a lot of openness to change. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is really start with the challenge or the opportunity in mind. And as I said, don't think about today, tomorrow, think about the day after tomorrow.
Yeah.
Think about the challenge you're facing then, and how the market is changing, how consumer behavior and candidate is changing. And then what are the steps you need to take to reach that?
Yeah.
Because I agree, the amount of solutions, it can be so overwhelming. Mm-hmm. What we sometimes see is that people fall in love with the solution, but that it turns out that a certain technology or solution is not really solving one of their challenges.
Yeah. And I do think, to add to that, Wes and Ottoline, if I look at what we've been doing in Randstad, for example, we've been doing pretty much weekly engagement surveys within our teams and across the organization using the employee engagement platform. And I would encourage actually HR leaders and talent acquisition managers to survey your workforce if you haven't already done so. You can do it simply as a Google form, or even through an email. Find out what the workforce wants in terms of, is this manageable? What ideas do they have to get started? And we do weekly team huddles, and it's amazing how much great ideas come out from those huddles of, is this the way of working? We still have jobs now. We're grateful for that. Is that going to change? So what ideas can we do to bring greater value to our employer and to our customers and talent as well? So I think there's survey as much as you can right now and get those great ideas on the table.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I know we're at time, and I just want to mention that we will be sending out this presentation, a recording, and then also answering any questions that we didn't have time to get to. So thank you for joining us again. In 2 weeks, we'll be doing a session on your employer branding during a time of crisis. So stay tuned for more information on that. Thank you again, Richard and Ottoline.
Thank you very much.
Very much appreciated. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.